Hello, everyone. Welcome to Political Power Ranker, where we track the movers and shakers and rule makers from the federal lawmaker level and statewide lawmaker level. And joining me always to take part in this show, Spencer Kimball, director of college, from Emerson College, director of polling there. He and his numbers are the star of the show. And Spencer, good to see you again, high above the Boston Commons.
Chris Berg, pleasure to be with you. Let's take a look at that Lone Star State. And speaking of stars, let's pull it together.
Here we go. Big race have been talked about for the past several months and all the political rags across the country. Sitting Senator John Cornyn, been in office since the early 2000s, against sitting Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Longtime friend of Donald Trump. John Cornyn becoming a very close friend of Donald Trump over the past several months as he helps move legislation through the U.S. Senate. But that's the big race. Paxton challenging him from the right. And you've got some new numbers, fresh polling. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Chris, we had a chance to jump in the field, and it's our first poll of this primary. And what we've seen is a lot different than what we see in these other public polls. We see a toss-up race between Paxton and Cornyn. There's a couple of big divides. There's an education divide. Those with college degrees are breaking for Cornyn by about 15 points. Those without a college degree are breaking for Paxton by about 10. There's also a bit of a gender divide that we're seeing. Males breaking for Cornyn by 5-6, and females breaking a little bit more for Paxton, though a higher number of undecideds. But a surprising result based on what we were expecting going into the field.
Huge change since the last public poll, anywhere from a 10 to a 20-point change, depending on poll you looked at. I mean, why is this shift happen? Any thoughts before we get to a couple people who may know even a little bit more?
Well, on the big picture, again, we're looking at it from Boston, and what we see is that Cornyn has made up some ground with President Trump. They flew in together last month during the crisis with the rain. And so we may have picked up some goodwill, but obviously we've got some folks on the ground, John and Manny, who could give us some real insights on what's happening day to day, because in the big picture, it seems that there is some change in the political winds down there.
That's right. We, again, have John Whitman, a Republican consultant from the Austin, Texas area, and Manny Garcia, a Democrat political operative consultant in the Austin area as well. Let's start with John. John, these are numbers the John Cornyn camp must be elated to see because they haven't been like that all summer.
No doubt they're going to be very happy about this. And as Spencer alluded to, every single public poll up until this one showed Ken Paxton with a significant lead in the double digits, anywhere from 10 to even 20, 25%. So they have to be overjoyed by these numbers. What I will say, and we talked about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we talked about this race, which is I think a lot of this will come down to money. And what you are seeing here is that Cornyn Super PAC is already up on broadcast, running positive spots in the big markets in Texas. And I think in addition to some of the things that Spencer touched on earlier, that's having a huge impact. One of the things I'll also add is based on this, it seems like there's probably some room to grow for Cornyn. He has not gone negative yet with some of the things that have been out there about Paxton on broadcast. So I imagine we'll see more of that over the coming months, and we'll see if those numbers get better for Cornyn or if Paxton starts to hit back.
Now, that's what we heard, leading into the summer is John Cornyn is going to have a lot of money to spend on this race, and you're already seeing it. He's already invested about $8 million into the, and he didn't, but PAC supporting John Cornyn have already invested about $8 million. There's a lot more of that available to him. Manny, let's bring you to the discussion. What's your just initial reaction from the Democrat side and what it means to the race moving forward?
The very thick opposition research book on Ken Paxton is perhaps coming over to haunt him as John Cornyn seems to be catching up here. Now, there's still a very large undecided block here. It's kind of funny to hear that John Cornyn hasn't been throwing slugs already, but if you look on Twitter, at every moment here, John Cornyn is getting into the mud with Ken Paxton. So sure, there might not be official money from John Cornyn being spent, but his friends are spending money, as you said here. So the slugfest is happening. The mud is being thrown back and forth here for sure. And as they're going back and forth, Democrats are waiting to see who we're gonna get in the general election.
John?
Manny, you're right. There is mud being thrown, but that's mainly through earned media. There has not been paid advertising behind that yet, is my point.
Yep. Spencer, what are you seeing besides more money, when we know more money is spent, what is Cornyn's route to continue this growth? Any thoughts there from what you're seeing in the polling numbers?
Well, it's going to be probably up to President Trump. He's got a big approval. He's like 73% approval amongst those undecided voters, that 37%. They're very big Trump supporters. So if Donald Trump puts his thumb on one of these two candidates, I think he'll move the scale and the needle over. And that's really what's going to come down to. We've seen out in Missouri where he's endorsed both candidates, and that would make it for a very exciting race. But I think if he endorsed one of these two candidates, that would be the game changer.
And one of the things that I have heard out of D.C. is that that's what they were waiting for. Trump did not want to jump in until he knew that Cornyn had closed that gap and maybe got out to a little bit of a lead. And I rarely say this, Spencer. You're rarely an outlier, but that is wrong. So and you got a track record to prove it. So this may be that first canary in the coal mine for Ken Paxton, that he's going to have to start to spend money and match Cornyn as we head into the fall. So that begs the question, who's going to be a better opponent to a potential Democratic challenger? The only announced big name, if you will, there are some smaller names, or smaller meaning not as well-known names out there, but the big name is Colin Allred for the Democrats, while there's some others in the wings that are waiting. And here are the numbers that you've been able to show us to compare what it would look like at this moment in time: Paxton versus Allred, Senator Cornyn versus Colin Allred. And here's what you have. What can you tell us about these numbers?
It doesn't look that much different if it's Cornyn or Paxton going against Allred. Now, we used Allred as the Democratic guinea pig, essentially, because he ran last time. And he would be the best known. You could have used Beto. We could have used a couple of other horses out there. But Colin Allred has announced that he's running. We asked in the Democratic primary. He cleared the field with over 60%. So he would be the nominee at this time, 7 months out. And if he did run, it doesn't look that different. If it's Cornyn, he runs a little bit lighter than against Paxton, but he makes up a little bit of ground with independents against Paxton. But outside of that, the voting module, the model stays the same depending on, regardless of the Republican nominee.
Manny, let's go to you first. Do these numbers surprise you? And people know Colin Allred after his run against Ted Cruz just in 24. Should this have been closer?
No, not close at all. We're looking at a single-digit race for this midterm election, starting off before money is being spent. And we're looking at an election environment where, Donald Trump and his party has passed a set of unpopular policies in the BBB bill. John Cornyn or whoever goes up is going to have to defend that. And so there is going to be some momentum nationally behind Democrats, some structural things that Republicans are going to have to deal with that Colin Allred or whomever the Democratic nominee is are going to have those kinds of advantages. Obviously, an uphill climb in Texas always, but you start off with a single-digit race and some ability there to get started here in Texas.
What's interesting, John, bringing you in here, is that the big fear out of D.C. was if Ken Paxton would happen to beat Senator Cornyn, that he may not be able to beat a Democratic, a highly visible, well-known Democratic candidate. At least at this juncture, with this candidate, that proves not to be the case, that he could do it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what this is showing, and it's showing that Texas is still a red state. I mean, the reality is actually Republicans increased their margin last election, and I think they'll have another successful year in 2026. This poll lines up pretty well with what we've seen in previous statewide polls this far out, and so I'd expect to see those numbers shift a little bit over the coming months, but I'm not surprised at all by this.
And Manny, So you guys know, as a party, who has the ability to generate excitement, to get people to the polls. You saw the Allred race in 24. It's early. So you're looking at these numbers and you're thinking, there are a lot of other talented people out there. Can we expect anyone else to jump into this race? Is this something that voters can look for in the headlines in the coming months?
You got a lot of talented people that are taking a look at it right now, and you got the conversation about Texas redistricting, where Beto O'Rourke has been on cable news on this conversation. James Talrico has been breaking quorum. He is in Chicago on cable news on this conversation, all over the Texas airwaves, all on local news on this conversation as he's breaking quorum. Jasmine Crockett is a member of Congress considering this as well, constantly on the news in this conversation. All of these folks are actively in this conversation, and we'll see later the threat to democracy has risen in the polls for Democrats. All of these three actors are considering this, and they've actively been in the conversation. Joaquin Castro has been considering whether or not he'll run statewide and for what seat as well. He's a member of Congress. He's been involved in these conversations as well.
All names recognizable for a vast majority of Texans. James Talrico, though, not quite as well known, but I had someone out of the blue bring up his Joe Rogan podcast interview. I listened to it. He came across as a reasonable person who you can have a conversation with, and I've met him. That's one that jumped out at me that I think voters don't know as well, but may want to get to know a little bit better.
Just yesterday, Mark Cuban tweeted about James Talrico, right? So he is a quick rising star, very quickly getting a boost here.
John, any of those names concern you as a Republican?
Listen, I don't think so. The reality is that there are to Manny's point, there are quite a few Democrats considering this. They continue to move to the left, more to the left every single day. And a contentious primary will only make that worse. And they'll say crazier things, and it'll be things that do not align with the general Texas electorate. So a contentious Democrat primary is better for Republicans.
All right, we are done. We're wrapping up our first segment. Next up is going to be the redistricting numbers. You're going to want to stick around for that as we head on with Political Power Ranker and power through, but we're going to take one quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker, where we track the movers and shakers and rule makers in Washington and across all 50 states, your state major party lawmakers. And today we're talking Texas, and the big issue across the country right now is, redistricting. And there's almost a mano battle going on. Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, v. Governor Gavin Newsom, who has made a lot of political headlines saying he's going to redistrict if Greg Abbott does. He's got a few more challenges than the Texas governor has. But Spencer, you did a poll, and you're going to show us for the first time what it looks like in Texas. Do Texans support this?
Thing in Texas is something they've been talking about for a little bit, a couple of months, and we see it in the numbers. They're split. We got? 38 opposed, 36 in favor, but 22% are unsure. And remember last week we were in California, and when we were in California, it was 42% that were unsure. So out in California, they're still coming to grips with redistricting. Texas, they've got their attitudes a little bit more crystallized, but what a difference we see with party affiliation. Republicans in Texas like redistricting about 70-10. Out in California, they're opposed by 8 points. But in California, the Democrats support it 2-1. So in Texas, they don't support it. And what's interesting in redistricting is that it helps a party on a state-by-state basis. So as we move this conversation forward, each state's going to have their conversation about if they like it or don't. And it's going to be really fascinating to watch how this issue plays out.
John, let's go to you first on this one. This is you were in the Abbott administration, one of the key players there. Is there any reason that he is not going to move forward and continue to push to make sure this happens? Would he ever slow down? Once he says, I'm going to do this, have you ever seen him back down?
When the governor says he's going to do something, he does it, and it generally happens. So I do not anticipate this quorum break that the Democrats have tried over and over again over the years to impact anything. They do have to come back to the state at some point. These maps are going to pass, and there will be redistricting in Texas.
And Manny, that's a point just to bring our viewers up to speed on. Democrats in the House have left the state. You all may have seen that to try to thwart the special session and not get this passed through. To John's point, at some point they have to return. You were part of 1 in 21. What are you thinking as this process moves forward and how any opposition can slow this down or stop it?
Look, Donald Trump ordered 5 seats out of Texas. That's what he requested. And, you know, if we go back a little bit, Donald Trump had ordered some votes out of Georgia. And the Georgia election officials, Republicans, mind you, said, no, we're not going to deliver you those votes. Now, fast forward to today, Donald Trump calls Greg Abbott and orders 5 congressional seats in mid-decade redistricting, mind you, which is not supposed to happen. And Greg Abbott says, absolutely, I'll deliver them. And I will violate the Voting Rights Act. I will do what it takes. I'll get them for you. Well, a couple of scrappy Texas Democrats said, we are not going to let that happen. They do the unprecedented move of breaking quorum. They bring the nation's attention to this. Now everybody's talking about redistricting. And Democrats, who are usually cast as, we're going to play by the rules, we're going to, you know, hold a higher ground, we're not going to bring, you know, a knife to a knife fight, decide, hey, we're going to play fire with fire. And now Gavin Newsom says, you want to do redistricting, Greg Abbott? I'll show you what we can do in California. We're going to erase any gains you think Donald Trump is going to get. And so here we are today. Texas Democrats broke quorum. The entire country is now talking about this. And if Greg Abbott wants to pass a map, at some point he might pass a map, and then we'll see him in court. Because in Texas, partisan redistricting is an illegal racial gerrymander, and that'll be the next phase that we'll look at this.
Right. John, Manny just threw a bunch of grenades your way.
Well, the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again and expecting a different result. The Democrats seem to break quorum every few years now, and guess what? They still have to come back to the state, and they still got to vote on the issue, and it still passes because Republicans haven't lost a statewide election in Texas in over 30 years. And here's the reality. You know, say the Democrats play by the rules. That is absolutely false. It's so comical to me that the Democrats fled to a state like Illinois, which is far more gerrymandered than Texas is, where Republicans get about 40% of the vote, yet only 17% of the congressional districts. You can call it political all you want, but Democrats have been doing this for decades, and the Republicans, President Trump and Greg Abbott, are fighting back. That is the bottom line, and that is the truth.
John, about 60% of the Texas public is people of color, and yet how many
is it okay?
Can people of color elect in Texas? Only 13? Can people of color elect in Texas? Here's the issue. It is a Voting Rights Act issue, and that's why federal court after federal court has determined that Texas and the Texas legislature has illegally drawn its map year after year after year. This is what happens in Texas. It's not just Democrats saying this. It is courts, federal courts saying this.
John, go ahead.
Let me ask you this. Is it okay when Democrats do it? Because what about New York, in Chicago, in Illinois, in Maryland? So it's just okay when Democrats do it. When Republicans do it, it's illegal.
There's a difference between partisan gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering. I think that's well argued in courts. I think that's
all right, let's move on to the next slide because this is interesting. Spencer, let's talk about this. The question you asked, do you agree or disagree with the following? Republicans in Texas are entitled to 5 more congressional seats. Legislators who left Texas to avoid voting on the redistricting plan should be arrested. Those 2 questions were asked. You got interesting results. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, it's quite controversial. It's not a slam dunk on either side, and I think this is where we're at in Texas, is that people think, one, that Trump was right about the 5 seats. Equal amount of people think Trump was wrong about the 5 seats. But it's not like a 60-40, 70-30 type of split. The other issue about arresting the legislators, again, there's very split on this issue. You probably have the moderate wing who doesn't, but look at the Paxton group. The Paxton voters, 79% want those legislators arrested. So you can see different pockets within the state. Very controversial issue happening in Texas. It's not a clear cut on what side this is going to land. It looks like the Republicans are going to win out, but we'll see what the fallout is from that, not only in Texas, but in other states potentially.
Well, let's just address that really quickly, John. I mean, in this poll, and this is a snapshot in time in August, right? A full year ahead of any voting, year plus ahead of any voting. But is there any worry that you create these districts and they become more purple, and all of a sudden, instead of a safe district and the numbers you have, you lose one?
Yeah, that's certainly always a concern in any kind of district drawing. And it was, something in whether it's New York, Illinois, or Texas. The reality is that there's only a certain number of people in the state. So when districts are redrawn, occasionally some districts become a little tighter than they were previously. So you certainly have to be on the lookout for that.
Manny, any thoughts that, the support there to stop this, to slow this down is not overwhelming by any stretch, but that you guys keep pushing. How does that help?
It is not overwhelming by any stretch. Independents and a plurality of independents are with us on this. They oppose this action. I think when you force choice this some more, and we've seen other polling that the language of politicians picking their voters is extremely unpopular for politicians to pick their voters. When we look at things like independent redistricting commissions, that is very popular. People want to get this, a real solution to this. This is just dirty to do these kinds of things right now, and it's because of unpopular policies that Donald Trump is passing, right? And so what folks really want right now is flood relief. They want an action, a determinative action from Greg Abbott, and that's not what's being done. He has emergency powers, and that's not what's being done by Greg Abbott. And so, I think we see what's going on right now, and I love that you all use the word entitled, because that came out of Donald Trump's own mouth. And so then we see the Republicans moving over to support, and the Democrats moving over. No party's entitled to anything. You're supposed to earn a vote. And we're going to come back to this over and over and over again throughout the election year.
You know what? We're going to have to leave redistricting there. We've got to take another quick break, and we're going to come back with who's up and who's down according to Spencer and his numbers. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker. We've now reached the moment in the show where Spencer's going to share with us who's up and who's down for the week in his polling. Spencer, who do you got?
Well, let's start on who's up. We have Governor Gavin Newsom up this week. What we've seen in Texas is he's in second place in the Democratic ballot test. We saw last week in California in first place. But more importantly, when we dig into those numbers, he's doing really well with minority voters, outshining Pete Buttigieg. So that's why we have the governor up. Obviously, the redistricting issue puts him at the forefront of the national conversation, and we'll see how this all plays out.
Been very, very visible all across the country in the past month or so, and fighting for what he believes to be right with redistricting, with the Marines in L.A., and so on. So that has raised his profile dramatically. You got one more who's up.
And we have Senator Cornyn up. We had put up Senator Cornyn because we thought he was down. We went into this poll. We saw other public polls where he was really down by double digits, and we're not seeing that. And because of that, we have him up.
Senator Cornyn up. All right, let's bring John and Manny in for a quick little thought on both of those. John, let's start with you, John Cornyn being up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this poll shows it, right? This is the first poll that I think has been positive for Cornyn in the Republican primary in a while. So his campaign strategy is clearly working. He's going to be overjoyed by these numbers. And to your point, Spencer, that you made earlier in the show, which is, I think, Trump gets involved and puts his thumb on the scale. That's all that's going to matter in this primary.
And Manny, Governor Gavin Newsom, his profile is rising when it comes to a national audience. He's starting to show some of his bona fides. What do you think of him and how he's doing right now?
He is proving he's an impressive fighter, and Texas Democrats are getting impressed by it. And so at this moment, when the voting rights of folks are under attack, he is rising up to this moment.
And now we're going to move over to Spencer, who did not have a great week in our polling from where you sit.
So we have Colin Allred. Allred gets the Democratic nomination. He's going to get 60% of the vote, clears the field for the nomination, but then he faces a real challenge with either one of the Republicans. He trails by 5 to 7 points in our polling, and generally the Emerson poll's a little light on the Republicans in Texas. And so as I look at those numbers, I say he's got a lot of ground to make up. He's a known candidate, so we have him on the downside this week.
Manny, you've got about 20 seconds to kind of react to that, and what are your thoughts moving forward for the party and the nominee, whoever it may be?
Look, it's a single-digit start. There's still a long way to go, but Colin Allred's got to get out there. He's got to get going. There's a lot of folks that are still in contention. That are thinking about this race, and they're getting a lot of attention right now, but Colin Allred needs to get into the mix.
John, final thought on Colin Allred?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would not shock me if in 3 months we're having a completely different conversation and we have another new leader for the Democrat nomination for U.S. Senate.
Well, I hope you come back in 3 months because this was a fiery conversation. I appreciate it. And I hope you learned a little bit about Texas and the polling that's going on right now and what's possible as we move forward. We're still 16 months, not 16, or about 14 months away from November of 2026. Thank you for watching Political Power Ranger. Thank you for everyone, Ranker and Power Ranger. Oh, my goodness. Power Ranker. And thank you to our guests for being here. And we'll see you next week.